Marcus Blackman was a name that carried weight. Not many knew what he looked like, but everyone had heard of his company, Blackman Enterprises. It was a powerful conglomerate, spanning industries from real estate to tech, and its owner, Marcus, had built it all himself. A self-made billionaire, Marcus had the kind of wealth that most people only dreamed about. Yet, he was a mystery to the people who worked for him. They rarely saw him. Emails, phone calls, and virtual meetings, these were the only glimpses they got of the man behind the company. Marcus liked it that way. He wasn't interested in being a public figure or attending flashy events. He preferred to stay out of the spotlight, focusing on growing his business from behind the scenes. But recently, something had been nagging at him. There was a new hire in the office, a young man named Jason, who had been struggling to fit in. Marcus had heard rumors that the staff wasn't treating Jason well, and that troubled him. He had built Blackman Enterprises to be a place where everyone should feel welcome, regardless of their background. But Marcus had no real idea of what was going on at ground level. Then, one cold winter afternoon, something inside Marcus shifted. What if the rumors were true? What if there was a problem with how his employees were treating each other? It wasn't enough to hear about it. He needed to see it for himself. And so, Marcus made a bold decision. He would visit his office without anyone knowing who he was. He would slip in unnoticed and observe how his employees treated the new hire and how they interacted with one another. He didn't know what he would find, but he knew he had to know the truth. As Marcus entered the office building, he felt a strange sense of excitement. No one would recognize him. His presence, cloaked in a simple jacket and baseball cap, was that of a regular person, someone who wasn't a billionaire. He wasn't sure what he was expecting, but something about seeing his employees firsthand intrigued him. It was like stepping into a world that had always been just out of reach, a world he had created but never truly lived in. The office lobby was quiet as he passed through, blending in with the crowd of employees moving in and out. No one gave him a second glance. He moved through the hallways unnoticed, his heart pounding just a little faster than usual. Was he nervous? Maybe. But more than that, he was curious about the people who worked for him, and curious about how they treated each other when no one was watching. Finally, he reached the open-plan office where his staff worked. Rows of desks filled the space, with employees typing away at their computers or talking on the phone. Marcus's gaze immediately fell on Jason, the new hire. Jason was sitting alone at his desk, staring at his screen but looking like he was trying to avoid eye contact with anyone else. It was clear to Marcus that he didn't fit in, and that made him uneasy. He walked through the aisles, listening carefully to the conversations around him. Most of them were about work, projects, deadlines, meetings, but none of them seemed to include Jason. Marcus moved closer to a group of employees, hoping to get a glimpse of what was going on. He overheard Rachel, a young woman, speaking to her colleague, Greg. "He's fine, I guess," Rachel said, her tone flat. "But honestly, I don't see why we needed to hire another person. It's just more work for us." Greg snorted. "He'll probably quit soon. These new hires always do. They think they're going to change the world, but they're just out of their depth." Marcus froze. Was that really how they felt about Jason? This wasn't just indifference. It was clear disdain, even mockery. And it didn't stop there. He watched as one employee, not even bothering to look up, snapped at Jason when he asked for help with a project. "Figure it out yourself," the employee muttered, not even giving Jason a chance to explain. Another employee, walking past Jason's desk, gave him a look that could only be described as condescending. Marcus's stomach turned. It was as if Jason wasn't even seen as a person, just someone to ignore or, worse, ridicule. He wanted to step in, to say something, but he knew it was better to observe, to gather more information before making a move. As he continued to walk through the office, he noticed something else. It wasn't just Jason being treated like this. There was a strange coldness in the air, a lack of warmth or camaraderie. The office seemed more like a factory than a place where people work together. Something didn't feel right. Marcus made his way over to Carla, the office manager, hoping she might have some insight. He approached her desk casually, trying to blend in. "Hey, Carla," he said. "How's Jason doing? Is he adjusting well?" Carla didn't even look up from her phone. "Jason? Yeah, I guess he's fine. But honestly, I don't think he'll last long. It's hard to fit in around here. The new hires always struggle. Marcus tried to press further. Have you had a chance to review his performance? Maybe he needs more guidance? Carla waved her hand dismissively. We all have our own work to do. We can't babysit the new hires. They need to figure things out on their own. Marcus was taken aback by her coldness. Was this really the attitude of his office manager? Someone responsible for leading the team? He could feel his anger rising, but he kept it in check. It was more important to get the full picture first. Just then his phone buzzed. It was Valerie, his personal secretary. Her message was simple: we need to talk. Now, Marcus excused himself from Carla's desk and stepped into a quieter part of the office. Valerie, always calm and professional, was waiting for him. I have to tell you something, she said, her voice low but urgent. The staff doesn't know who you are. They think you're just some random guy who wandered in. And they've been treating Jason, well, honestly, they've been treating him terribly. Marcus's eyebrows furrowed. What do you mean? Valerie hesitated. They've been dismissing him, ignoring him. And it's not just Jason. It's anyone who doesn't fit their idea of what's acceptable. If you're not like them, if you don't fit their mold, they make sure you know it. A wave of realization hit Marcus. He had suspected something was wrong, but hearing it confirmed from Valerie was a wake-up call. He was shocked, but more than that, he was hurt. How had he let this happen in his company? How had he not seen the culture that had been allowed to grow? I had no idea, he said quietly. I didn't know it was this bad. Valerie's face softened with concern. It's been going on for a while. People are afraid to speak up. But it's not just the new hires. They don't respect anyone who doesn't fit their mold. And the worst part is, they think no one will ever find out. Marcus's chest tightened. He had been so focused on growing the company, on making money, that he had failed to see the cracks in its foundation. He looked at Valerie, his mind racing. I need to fix this. I need to see the truth. Now, Marcus's mind was set. He couldn't let this go. He would reveal himself to the staff and confront them about what he had learned. He needed them to know the truth, not just about Jason, but about the toxic culture that had taken root within Blackman Enterprises. But what would happen when the employees realized the man they had been dismissing was the very person they worked for? Would they be ashamed? Would they change? Marcus didn't know the answer, but he was about to find out. And one thing was certain: the truth was coming, and it would change everything. The next morning, Marcus woke up feeling a sense of determination he had never felt before. The events of the day before, the way his employees treated Jason and the lack of respect they showed each other, still haunted him. He knew he couldn't let this slide. He had spent years building Blackman Enterprises, but it was clear that he had overlooked something fundamental: the culture inside his company. The atmosphere was toxic, and it needed to change. Marcus decided it was time to take action. He wasn't going to hide behind emails and virtual meetings anymore. He was going to confront his employees, face to face, and show them who he really was. No more secrecy. No more pretending to be just another guy walking through the office. That morning, he arrived at the office as usual, dressed in his plain jacket and baseball cap. He could feel the weight of his decision as he walked through the lobby. But this time, he wasn't just an observer. He was about to reveal himself as the owner, the person they had been disrespecting without even knowing it. Marcus had arranged for a meeting in the large conference room. The employees didn't know it yet, but they were all going to be there. One by one, they filed in, talking among themselves, completely unaware of the surprise that awaited them. As the last employee took their seat, Marcus stood up at the front of the room. He could feel his heart racing, but he pushed the nerves aside. This was necessary. It was time to expose the truth. Good morning, everyone, Marcus's voice rang out, calm and firm. I've been watching you all for the past day. I've been listening to your conversations, watching how you interact with each other, and I'm not happy with what I've seen. The room went silent, the air thick with confusion. The employees looked at each other, unsure of what was going on. Had they done something wrong? They had no idea what was coming. I've seen the way you treat each other, Marcus continued. The way some of you treat Jason, the new hire. The coldness, the dismissiveness. The way you ignore people, judge them based on who you think they are. I've watched it all. Some employees shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A few exchanged nervous glances. But most were still in the dark, unsure of what was happening. Marcus took a deep breath, gathering his strength. "And what you don't know," he said, "is that I am Marcus Blackman. I'm the one who owns this company. I'm the person you've been disrespecting. And I've had enough." The room froze. The employees looked at each other, stunned. A few gasps filled the air as it finally hit them. This man standing in front of them was their boss. The man they had been treating like an invisible figure, someone they could talk about behind his back and ignore. Carla, the office manager, was the first to speak, her voice trembling. "Mr. Blackman, I didn't know. I thought you were just some visitor." Marcus's gaze was hard. "You didn't know? Then what about all the times you dismissed Jason? What about the way you and others treated him like he didn't matter? Like he was invisible?" Carla opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She looked around at her colleagues, realizing for the first time how much they had all failed. The guilt was written on her face. I'm sorry, Mr. Blackman," she stammered. "I didn't realize what I was doing. I didn't realize how wrong it was." One by one, the employees started to speak up, their faces red with shame. "We didn't mean to just. Jason's new, and we didn't know how to," one of them tried to explain. Marcus held up a hand, silencing them. "It's not just about Jason. This attitude, it's about how you treat each other. You can't just pick and choose who deserves respect based on your own biases. You can't treat people like they're not worth your time, just because they don't fit your idea of what's acceptable." The silence in the room was deafening. Marcus could see that the weight of his words was starting to sink in. The truth was hitting them harder than he had expected. But then, something unexpected happened. Just as the room was about to fall into an even heavier silence, Valerie, his personal secretary, entered the room with a stern look on her face. "Mr. Blackman," she said, her voice filled with urgency. "I think you need to hear something else." Everyone turned to look at her, confused. What else was there? Hadn't they heard enough? Valerie moved to the front of the room and looked at the employees with a piercing gaze. "What you don't know," she said slowly, "is that this kind of behavior isn't new. It's been happening for months, maybe even longer. And it's not just about Jason. It's about how you treat anyone who doesn't fit your mold. If someone doesn't look or act the way you think they should, you push them aside. And that's not just a problem, it's a toxic culture." The employees stared at Valerie, stunned into silence. They had never heard her speak like this before. Valerie, the woman who had always been professional and calm, was now speaking with a raw honesty that made everyone uncomfortable. Marcus stood tall, his eyes never leaving his staff. "This is the problem. Not just here, but in every part of your life. If you treat people this way in the office, how do you treat them outside of it? This is a wake-up call, for all of you. A company is only as strong as its culture, and right now, we've got a problem." There was a long pause. Marcus could feel the tension in the air, but he wasn't backing down. It was time to make sure they understood the seriousness of the situation. "This needs to change, starting now. You will not treat anyone in this company with disrespect anymore. If you're not willing to change, you will not have a place here." The room was heavy with guilt, but something else was starting to shift. Some employees were beginning to understand the gravity of their actions. Carla, who had been the most dismissive, finally spoke up. "I'm sorry, Marcus. You're right. I don't know why I let it go on like this. I've failed you, and I've failed this company. It won't happen again." The others, one by one, began to apologize as well. "I didn't realize how bad it was," Greg said, his voice softer than usual. "I've been blind to it." Jason, who had been standing quietly at the back of the room, finally spoke. "I just wanted to fit in. I didn't want to be an outsider." Marcus looked at him, his expression softening. "Jason, you don't have to apologize. You're part of this company. And you deserve respect, just like everyone else here." The room was still, but the atmosphere had changed. There was no longer an air of defensiveness or denial. The employees were beginning to understand, And with that understanding came a sense of shame and regret. But it wasn't too late to fix things. Change doesn't happen overnight, Marcus said, his voice calm but firm. But today, we've taken the first step. From now on, respect will be the foundation of this company. If we can't respect each other, we can't succeed together. The employees nodded, and for the first time, Marcus felt like they understood. This wasn't just about his personal values. This was about creating a culture that valued kindness, fairness, and respect for everyone. As Marcus walked out of the room, he knew this was just the beginning. He had a long road ahead of him, but he was ready. He had taken the first step toward transforming Blackman Enterprises into the kind of company he had always dreamed of, one where respect wasn't just expected, it was earned by every person who walked through the door. And as for the employees, they had learned a hard lesson, but it was one they would never forget. They were no longer just working for a company. They were working for themselves and for each other. And that made all the difference.